As fundraisers, we really do get a bad rap. If you really want to clear a room at a cocktail party, you can begin by introducing yourself. Hi, I'm Kathy. I spend my day asking people for money. If you want space, you'll get it. And it's actually one of the reasons that fundraising professionals have really rebranded ourselves as development professionals. Let's go ahead and get started. I want to introduce you to the amazing team that I have the honor of working with. As you can see, I'm Kathy. I have been with DBSA for about 2 years now, and I've worked in nonprofits my entire career, beginning in community organizing, fundraising, program development and execution, advocacy, volunteer work. Joining DBSA and leading this team has really enabled me to bring all the skills I've honed over the years under one roof. I am so drawn to our mission of providing hope, help, support, and education for people living with mood disorders because I'm a caregiver to members of my family who live with depression. Kimberly King, who you'll hear from soon, has just celebrated her 3rd year with DBSA. Kimberly uses her talents in leading many of our partnerships. She has maintained relationships within the community. And also what she's going to share with you today is the skill that she brings working with our pharmaceutical partners and increasing their support and sponsorship of the work we do here at DBSA. Chrissy Gargano is the newest member of our team. She's been with us for about 1.5 years now. Chrissy joined us right as the pandemic was getting started. She's been sheltering in place for quite some time. Chrissy manages our foundation and our corporate relationships. Chrissy uses her skills as a storyteller and writer to develop impactful grants and funding opportunities to support our national priorities. Chrissy will be discussing what you need to be prepared for in writing grants to fund your chapter's work. So let's keep going here. So we're going to try and get folks engaged. We'd like to learn a little bit about you. We're going to be using Slido a little bit throughout the presentation. And in a moment, I'm going to go ahead and advance my slide. But if you would prefer, you can either use your smartphone and put it over the QR code and it will open up a screen in Safari. Or if you'd rather, you can use a different browser and bring up Slido, slido.com, and you'll see this screen. And where it says enter code here, you're going to enter fundraising, no spaces. So you can either use slido.com or the QR code. If you are partial to typing on your computer, I would recommend that you use slido.com. Oops. So go ahead and pull up that QR code and answer this question for us. You opening your camera? Is nobody playing my game with me? We have a lot of will if I must, which is great. Give to a friend's cause if they give to mine. Nobody jumping out of bed, wanting to ask everyone they know. There you go. The truth comes out. You thought of asking for money gives you a tummy ache. It's really not uncommon. Let's see if we can turn the tides a little bit with this one. All right. See if I can get this slide to advance here. So here's the thing is, the myth is that it's always scary and that you're begging people for money and it's embarrassing. The truth is, it's really not. What you are doing when you ask someone to contribute is giving them the opportunity to support your mission, to support something you really care about. So what we plan to accomplish today is pretty simple. We are going to share what it takes to build a winning proposal or pitch, and we'll discuss the different sources that you might want leverage to raise funds. And we'll also share with you a lot of ideas about how we prepare when we go ahead and make that ask. So we're going to do one more question here. Can you share with us what you raise money from? Also known for, what do you want to achieve with the funding that you're trying to raise? Don't be shy. Substance use disorder support. For now, just continuing to exist. Staffing, that's really fair. All really important things. We've applied for grants before to have speakers and people lead workshops. That's also great sponsorship opportunities. Let's see. One more, to support facilitator training. Okay. Let's see if I can get my slide to advance here. So thinking about this, let's get started. Where do you want to begin? Before you begin any proposal, you really need to be clear on what you want to achieve. You need to be able to tell people in a very organized and logical way what it is. In other words, your elevator pitch. You'll be most successful when you're super clear about your results. So you need to do your research, you need to know what you want to achieve, and you need to organize your work. There's also a lot of different areas to go to and ways to think about funding. The first is corporate sponsorships, where those are best suited really for an event. I want to do A, and I need this much money to make it happen. Grants tend to be longer term. They're projects that you want to engage in over a period of time. They're going to take a lot of commitment and programming to make happen. And those kinds of fundings come through different opportunities. And then finally, there's individual contributions. And those tend to be the most free and available ones to you. When someone donates, they're really donating to your mission for the most part. So you need to know your story. As I said, you'll be most successful when you're super clear about what happens and what result you want to see. And to do this, you have to have a goal. We've all heard about SMART goals, right? Being specific, being measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. You've got to be able to achieve something, whether it's 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 years, but it's got to have a beginning and the end. And then you'll need to think about how you're going to make it happen. And for this, I like to think about getting a piece of paper and making some columns. Go really quick and dirty. What are you going to need? What resources is it going to take to happen? Is it going to take staff? Is it going to take volunteers? Do you need a facility? Do you need participants? Of course you need funding. Think through all those little things and get them thrown down on the paper. Step 2 is listing your activities. What do you plan to do? Are you going to, do a support group? Is it to hold a seminar? Is it to do a networking event so you can, raise more money? Whatever it is, get it down, get it dirty. Then think about who your participants are. Who's your audience? Is it people that are participating in the event? Is it the community at large that you want to educate on? Whatever it is, get it down, and then list your impact. What do you want to achieve? Are you going to change somebody's mind about something? Are you going to help somebody build a deeper understanding? Will people be healthier because of your program? And then finally, jot down how you're going to measure it. How are you going to know if you're succeeding? Here's the best part. You're just making lists here. You're going to use this list to then help you craft your story in a way that makes sense to the person reading it or the person you're talking to. Finally, I really recommend starting local. Research your community and know your prospects that are there. Understand what matters to them. If you're looking at a bank who you've read in the paper that they're talking about the mental health of their people that work for them. Okay, well, you know a little bit about that. If you are walking through your local grocery store and you see something on their bag, or you know they've supported another mental health organization's work, make sure you go and start talking to them, because that's, those closest to you are the best places to begin. Do your research and make them a winning offer. And with that, I am going to go ahead and pass off to Kimberly, who's going to really help us dig in on that.
Thank you, Kathy. So yes, digging in on research. You probably heard this word about 10 times since the start of this, but it can't be said enough. You must do your research before you approach any funder. In my work with the pharmaceutical industry partners, I am working with corporate entities, and in those spaces, I am primarily working with sponsorships. And the first thing you have to do is know who you are approaching. The best way to do that is to look at the businesses in your area, to go online, go to those websites, pull up the 990s for the businesses in your area, and find out what their focus and priorities are, and if they have any means or way to give back to your 501c3. Do you have relationships? A lot of times people ask me, what do you do with the pharma partners? What does that mean? A lot of it is about relationships and understanding what the priorities are, both for the company that you're trying to get funds from, and seeing how they align with your overall mission, what you're trying to do. So one of the best ways to do that is to leverage the relationships you have within your board and personal network to see if anyone has a connection that might be a good fit. Oftentimes when you go to a company's website, you get either an email or you don't have a name and you're not quite sure who's the right person to reach out to. A lot of time a soft handoff or introduction makes a difference in making sure that your request or your inquiry gets to the right person. So talk amongst your friends, talk about the people around you, and take opportunities to network whenever possible. And make sure, more importantly, whether it's a legal pad, a yellow legal pad, or Excel spreadsheet, or whatever database that you choose, that you keep track of your interaction. So nothing more knowing to potential funders for you to have already reached out to them and to forget that you've reached out to them. So keep track of your records. Next slide, please, Kathy. So what is corporate sponsorship? Corporate sponsorship is support, is a payment by a business to a nonprofit to further the nonprofit's mission that is generally recognized by the nonprofit with an acknowledgement that the business has supported the nonprofit's activities, programs, and special events. A successful corporate sponsorship is both the charitable nonprofit and its sponsor. A long time ago, when I first was starting out in development, I was on one of those hour-long free webinars, and those are typically ones you're like, I'm not sure if I'm gonna get too much out of it. But one of the most valuable things I got, even though I had been a nonprofit for some time, and it's often the thought behind many people who start nonprofits, is that the mission alone is enough. Well, the truth of the matter is development or fundraising is the business end, and it's still business. So it's very important for you to understand, while your mission is important and you want companies that support your mission, they also want a return on their investment. So it's very important for you to acknowledge that, and that it's a two-way relationship. Next slide, Kathy. So what I just said, investing more than your mission. Like I said, to corporate sponsors, they're interested in, because this is a personal, your mission is a personal interest to them, or their company or their constituents in most cases. But it really offers an opportunity for them to show their faith and demonstration to the community. And it helps them attract new customers. Kind of the halo, what they call the halo effect. In other words, showing goodwill attracts more people to your business. And that's what partners are looking for in terms of this, when they decide to invest beyond your actual program and services. Charitable nonprofits, in return, receive financial support and may also experience increased attention from media and the public, and in-kind services and donations. Some people may never have heard about DBSA or any other nonprofit that you may be representing, but by partnering with that corporate entity, you get more recognition and more connection and more reach and more people seeking out your services. Next slide. So are you ready to approach a corporate sponsor? You're probably saying from this, no, I'm not. But these are some things to consider in readiness before you approach a corporate sponsor. One, identify the value proposition that will attract a business to sponsor your nonprofit mission or event. What are their priorities? What is it about what you're providing that connects back to the larger picture of that company or that contact you have within that company? Number two, what goal do you have for the nonprofit besides financial contributions? What is your mission? What is your long-term goals? What are you hoping to accomplish and what you're requesting money for? Those are all important things to consider before you approach your first corporate sponsor. You also want to document the priorities and deliverables, meaning the items that you're saying that you're going to do with the money that you receive. Sponsors are looking for a return on investment, and they want to know that what you say you're delivering on, what you're asking for the money for, is exactly what it is that you're going to do. So you want to show good faith by delivering that, because that will potentially lead to renewed sponsorship and solidify you as a good investment. Keep in mind that anytime a nonprofit engages in a transaction with a for-profit, that charitable nonprofit has an obligation to avoid private benefit that may occur. For example, you don't want to promise things, or you don't want to commit to things that are unethical or that could be perceived as you're taking gifts in exchange for money and not really true to your mission. So you want to be really mindful that these are business transactions. Everything should be documented, and that to keep keep everything on board. Next slide. And last and certainly not least is acknowledgement. Oftentimes nonprofits struggle with the idea of what can I give back to a corporate entity that has millions of dollars? Well, name recognition is usually the big answer, and you can acknowledge your donors in a number of ways: through your website, through your social media posts, through a press release, in your annual report, or as well as on promotional materials for the program. Again, that halo effect is what the corporate sponsor is investing in, because when they're seen as being aligned with a good cause, they have more people attracted to their goods or services. And don't forget to send a tax receipt when you get to tax time, and your accountant, if you have one, or you're doing your own taxes, you need to have all that paperwork so that everything that is verified by the IRS. And I think that is it for my side. I'm gonna welcome any questions in the Q&A, and knowing that it's late in the day and people are probably tired of typing in the Q&A box, I'm gonna pass the screen over to my colleague, Chrissy.
Thank you, Kimberly. So now we're going to talk a little bit more about grants. So there are a few different types of grants. There are government grants, corporate grants, and foundation grants. All of them will have a similar kind of grant cycle and similar components to them, but government grants typically are much more complicated and much more time consuming to put together and also to execute. So we're going to focus a little bit more on what you'll see with corporate and foundation grants. Next slide, please. So we're going to start just talking a little bit about the grant cycle, which looks a little bit like this, determining, and this is stuff Kimberly talked about earlier too. It all kind of translates to between grant writing and corporate sponsorships. It's all, so that makes it easier to remember. You want to make sure you are determining your priorities, researching, and then you'll write, and then hopefully you'll win the grant, report, and then build a relationship. So I'll go a little bit further into each one. The next slide, Kathy. Yes, so back to determining your priorities. This is taking a look at, what you have going on and what you want to do, and determine what is most important for you to find funding for at this particular moment. You all gave some examples, some great examples earlier on. So just knowing that and knowing what you want funding for helps you keep focus as you move on to doing your research. For grants specifically, there are some great search engines such as GrantStation or Foundation Directory Online, where you can use keywords to look for foundations and corporations that have granting bodies within them too. Both GrantStation and Foundation Directory Online do have subscription fees, but I'm going to put in the chat, there is Candid is actually part of Foundation Directory Online, and you may be able to find some places in your area where you can go and access their Foundation Directory Online subscriptions. We have a library here in Chicago that enables us to do that if we need to. But other than that, you can also just do some searching on Google. I have Google Alerts set up. That is a little bit more few and far between where you're going to find something that that is specific to what you're looking for, but it can still happen. So I wouldn't discount it. And then back again to what Kimberly mentioned about leveraging your connections. Talk to anybody else that's working with you, talk to your board members, see if they have connections and that they're willing to make introductions to any foundations or companies that might be interested in supporting your work. And then in all of these, as you're looking for foundations or companies to invest, make sure you're paying attention to their specific funding priorities and all of their eligibility guidelines. There will be, depending on the granting body, there will be either a plethora of information or no information at all. And if there is, some of these smaller family foundations don't even have websites. Sometimes, say if you're looking on GrantStation will have a contact that they can direct you to, so you can reach out that way and ask more about what they're interested in funding. You can also, as Kimberly mentioned, take a look at 990s. If you find a foundation that you think might be up your alley, you can do some snooping on their 990s, where you can find organizations that they've given to in the past, and you can see if those are similar, if they're working in the mental health space or not. That's another way to do some snooping. And again, as Kimberly mentioned before, putting any and all notes together in one spot. Make sure you know who you've reached out to, and as you're doing this research, make sure you're writing down any deadlines on your calendar and set reminders for yourself as those deadlines come up. And then once you've done your research, you can start writing. And depending on the organization, again, this might be, some organizations fund programs only. That means specific programs that you're working on. And then there are also some organizations that will do general operating funds, which means they give you the money and you can decide where you need it most within your organization. And depending, again, on the organization and depending on the funder, the process might be through a portal where you have to log in and there are questions and you type the responses in there, or it might just be a narrative and they give you some prompts to use to write that narrative. Either way, I always like to put that into a Word doc or a Google Doc more specifically, and making sure to include any character counts or word counts, because going back and realizing you have not paid attention to those character counts is very annoying, disappointing. So make sure you're keeping an eye on those, and that's an easy way to then share also with, share with Kathy all the time, and she can read and make edits directly to that document, and you can work on that together with somebody. It's always good to get second set of eyes on anything that you submit. And yes, just making sure to follow all the instructions. And some organizations will ask for a letter of inquiry before submitting a full proposal, where you have an opportunity to present a little shorter of an introduction to the work that you're proposing funding for. And then they may or may not invite you to submit a full proposal. And then hopefully you've written a great application and you are awarded funding. And then the next stage, of course, in the grant cycle will be reporting. Again, depends, all organizations are different. Some won't require any reporting, but most of the time you're going to find you're going to need to provide a yearly report, usually a narrative of some sort that reports back on the work that you did, that you received funding for, and sometimes as well, specifically if it was for a specific program, they will ask for some sort of financial reporting as well. And if you are required to submit a report, you will generally find this once you're awarded funding, the funding body will give you a letter of agreement or a grant agreement, hopefully most of the time, and that should have any of those requirements listed there. And again, make sure to put that once you get that letter, put those dates in your calendar so you don't forget about them. And with any aspect of fundraising, maintaining those relationships are so important. So throughout this whole cycle, make sure you're keeping in contact with whoever you have their contact information, and you might not if it's a small family foundation, and they also might not want to hear from you, to be frank, but some of them really do. And that's the best kind of relationships, or those are the best kinds of funders who really are looking to build relationships with their grantees. And definitely once you get a grant, make sure that you're staying in close contact and make sure you're checking in with your program officer. That's generally what they call the person that you'll be working with once you've received that funding. Make sure you're checking in with them to see how they like to be communicated with. Do they want to receive your newsletters, or do they want you to check in every so often? Do they want some phone calls here and there? How do they like to stay in communication? And some of them will love that and they will want to talk to you all the time. And some you'll never hear from until it's time for a renewal, and that's okay too. But make sure just to check in and ask. So now that we've talked more broadly about the cycle, we'll get a little bit more into the writing part of it, which includes the common grant components. Two of the most basic components you're almost always going to see asked are, what are your organization's mission and vision statements? So for DBSA National, that is, DBSA provides hope, help, education, and support to individuals living with a mood disorder. And our vision is that DBSA envisions wellness for people living with a mood disorder. And then you're almost always going to be asked what your target population is. And this is, again, going to depend on if you are writing for general operating funding or if you're looking for a specific program. So for example, for DBSA, a lot of the times our target population is individuals living with a mood disorder, but sometimes we have done programs for specific populations such as veterans. Sometimes we've done some demonstration projects that are in specific areas. So all of those kinds of aspects of a population, whether it's, disability status, whether it is location, you can include that in that section. And then the next, and one of the most important grant components, is the need statement. You're almost always going to be asked what the need is for your work that you're doing, what the need is for the specific program you're looking to do. And this is your opportunity to really build your case why they should fund you in your work. And you want to make sure that you are including all the information that you find really compelling to the work that you're doing. And if you're using statistics, which can be great, you don't want to overdo statistics. This is a great place for storytelling. If you have, testimonials from people that you've worked with, but if you are using statistics, make sure that those are really specific to the work that you're doing and local if you can. And make sure that they are coming from a reputable source and that they're more recent. Try to avoid older data if possible. And be sure to cite your sources too. And I wouldn't worry too much about, the method of citing those sources. You don't need to do Chicago style or, just make sure that the general location of your sources are in there. And then you'll get to the meat of it, which is the description of your work. A general description is usually asking for about your organization as a whole. So all of the work that you do, and then they will ask if it's for program funding for a program description of the specific work that you are looking for funding for. So this could be support groups, your advocacy work, or as some of you mentioned before, staffing. It could be supplies. It could be, you know, it could be a new building to hold support groups in. That's where you're gonna put all of that information. And then another important grant component is objectives, goals, objectives, outcomes. You're gonna see all of these types of words in this area, and they mean different things to different organizations. I always like to just Google the difference between goals, objectives, and outcomes to remind myself pretty regularly, because it can get confusing. Just make sure to pay attention to what it is specifically that they're asking for. I have here in my notes that goals are overarching aims, generally not specific enough to measure. And then objectives are specific achievements that contribute towards that goal. And outcomes, really, which is often what they're going to be looking for, actually, is a change in behavior or attitudes from the people that are benefiting from this program. So if you're not clear on what they're looking for, you can always ask too, if there's someone to connect with, or you can just kind of include all of those. That's the safest bet. And then they're always, or almost always, going to be asking for some attachments, and some of the most common ones that they're going to ask for is your list of board of directors, your budget, usually both an organizational budget and a program budget if you're applying for program funding, and then your tax exempt letter, your 501c3 letter or IRS letter. They'll, you know, phrase differently in different times. And generally they will also ask for your audited financials. And that is it. If anybody has any questions.
There is a question. We got Deborah from Portland, the Portland, Oregon chapter. Deborah wanted to know, how can we get access to see an organization's 990 form? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question. I know that you can find them on a ProPublica website. I think you can also get them on GuideStar. Kathy, do you have any other?
Yeah, I sometimes will just Google XYZ organizations 990, and you'd be surprised. Most of them do come up.
Yes.
And when you're looking to see who they've made grants to and the range of their grants, you have to sort through all the way to the end of it. And at the end, it will list where they've given grants to.
Right. I think we have another question. I think Chrissy is answering it in the chat box about sending a copy of the presentation. And
yeah, the presentation we will post for you afterwards. Thank you. Well, thank you, Chrissy. I'd like to spend a couple more minutes talking about what it's like to ask individuals for donations. It's likely the most common way your organization will solicit funds, and it's probably the most intimidating for folks. So let's do one more question. And this is a simple one. Does your organization or chapter solicit individual gifts? Oh, good. That's so good to see. I'll give it one more minute. It looks like most of you do ask for individual donations. I could have put a follow-up question in there. Are you asking for contributions from your support group participants, or are you going outside of your small network? So just kind of keep that in mind as we go. So let's see if I can get to the next slide. So there are two main categories when asking people for gifts. We call the first one your annual fund, and it represents probably most of who you're going to ask for funding. For DBSA National, our annual appeals reach about 40,000 people each year. And we build our campaigns off of very specific themes. For example, May, we build around Mental Health Awareness Month. September is Suicide Prevention Awareness Month. July is BIPOC, Mental Health Awareness Month. And so our themes for each of those months will, our appeals will center around those themes. And I will say that while we may ask about 40,000 people for contributions through those annual campaigns, our return on that is about 2,000 people contribute to DBSA annually. So, what is it? You got to put out a lot of casts to catch some fish out there. The other main category is major gifts. Major gifts really varies from organization to organization. For a hospital, for a university, they call a major gift maybe over $100,000. They have a lot more resource and a lot more capacity to do that one-on-one personal gift. At DBSA National, we call a major contributor anybody who contributes over $3,500 in a year. And we equate that to about the cost of what one of our national virtual support groups costs. So it does mean something for us. And we encourage, you can set your major threshold wherever you need to send it. And then when you're going to ask, there is a donation cycle, regardless of who you're asking. First, you need to identify who you're going to ask, and you need to qualify them. Do they have the capacity to contribute what you're asking for? And is the money, is it within their reach? And the next is you're going to qualify a donor. So think of this as dating. When you go out on a date, you don't start with a really romantic dinner. You start with some coffee, and then you move the relationship along at the pace that makes sense for you and the donor. Eventually, you'll make that ask. You know a little bit about their personal interests. You know how they align with the work that you're doing. And so you're going to ask them for a contribution that's reasonable for them to support something that you know that they're interested in. And then finally, you want to say thank you in a way that resonates with the donor. Could be a phone call. It could be a personal letter. It could be a phone call from a different board member. Or maybe it's somebody that really likes the big old shout out on social media and you want to thank them through your chapter's Facebook group. Just know what's right for them and make sure that you do say thank you. Okay. And then there are a couple other things to think about. Yeah, some of these make sense for the work that you're doing. Some of them don't. But I always think about, if you have an email list, are you making the most of it? Are you using your social media to engage folks? Are you always talking about educating your donor? DBSA National, we are always on social media talking about different topics. We only ask people through social media to contribute maybe once a month. And our emails directly to our audiences once or twice a month, unless it's the end of the year, in which case those actual hard, please donate to our mission, come more frequently. If you have a support group every month and you're meeting online, there is nothing wrong with putting in the chat box, hey, did you get something out of this? Help us continue our work. Go here to donate. No donation is too small. And then actively go out to your community beyond the usual suspects to ask people for contributions. And don't forget workplace giving, employer matches, all of those things that you as a small support group might not have the capacity to do doesn't mean that the people who you're reaching don't have the opportunity to contribute to you through a workplace giving campaign or a matching gift from their employer. Food for thought on major gifts. Are you asking support group participants who have significant capacity to make your chapter one of their top 3 charity choices? Are there philanthropists in your community that you always see in Chicago? We have the Pioneer Press. If you see Jim Bob's face is supporting local groups and he's always in there, there's nothing that prevents you from connecting with Jim Bob. And consider asking major giver for something specific. Ask them to underwrite your support groups, let them know, hey, we pay rent to XYZ organizations and we have so that we can meet here and we provide coffee. Your gift of $1,000 would make that happen for a full year. And then finally, do not forget about Giving Tuesday. Giving Tuesday is run at a national level. There's a lot of run up to Giving Tuesday. You can get all sorts of resources at www.givingtuesday.org/resources. So leverage that, use that, set a goal, make an extra push off it. It's a really, really great way to get folks motivated. And now I would say, did we miss anything? I know it looks like most people are using the chat box as opposed to the Q&A. And it looks like Chrissy has been responding back and forth to that. So thank you, Chrissy, for doing that, because I can't always see it all. Is there anything in the chat box that you want to ask of Kimberly, Chrissy, or myself? Oops, let me go back. Oh, sorry, I'm gonna stop clicking things. All right, Kimberly, Chris, I can't see the chat box, so if there's anything in there, you'll need to tell me.
I think Chrissy hasn't handled. There's a lot of conversation about, different opportunities or ways that people have I've seen in terms of doing fundraisers in the mall or community ask, and Chrissy's answering those questions. I would just say, take every opportunity you can. Always make that ask. It doesn't always have to be a hard ask. It could just be let people know that you have an opportunity to give by having envelopes or having a jar, a collection jar, however, or a wishing well, whatever method works, in terms of saying, hey, we have a way to give, because sometimes the soft sell works too.
Mm-hmm. And I would just add to make sure that you're bringing materials, if you have them, for anyone to bring home with them so they can remember, and they might not give right there, but they might, take that home and then see it again and remind them that they wanted to look more into your organization or to make a donation. So just make sure they have something tangible to take with them if you can.
And if you're tech savvy, as you saw with the Slido deck, the new thing that's really become popular as partially because of COVID and restaurant dining is QR codes. So if you have someone or a young person that knows a little their way around a computer, you can set up QR codes, and that way, if you don't have like actual hard copy materials, you can have that information for people to scan.
Well, thank you, Chrissy and Kimberly. Before we let you all go, development professionals never go without an ask. Or a challenge. So Chrissy and Kimberly and I have a challenge for you. And that is, over the course of the next year, write one grant to somebody. Ask one community organization. Is it a church or not a church, but the local grocer or the local banker. Ask them to sponsor something for you. Solicit one friend outside your support group for a gift. You can do this. It is not scary. Our team can't do it for you, but we can help and we can poke you in the right direction. And you can always reach out to us at development@dbsaalliance.org, and we'll see what we can do for you.